Hello and welcome back to another episode of Conquering My Collection. This is a documentary that I'd heard of a couple of years ago, I think, or like a year and a half ago, and I'd seen the trailer for it and it just instantly drew me in. And I thought, wow, I want to see that. But it did look like no offense to anyone who makes these films, but it did look like, okay, it might be one of those like crowd-funded things. And there's been a few in the past I've seen that have had like a promising first clip or a trailer, and then they just don't really pan out and they never get finished or whatever. And it had been a year or so since I'd heard about it, anything else about it. And I thought, oh, maybe it just didn't, get made. And that's just me not keeping tabs on what's going on or anything, but for some reason it came into my sphere of of kind of awareness, and I was like, oh, that thing, and then it got released and everything. It came out, I think, at the end of last year on Amazon Prime. At the very least, it's on Amazon Prime right now. But of course, me being me, I had to buy the Blu-ray, and it is Life After the Navigator. So, if you are aware of the film Flight of the Navigator from 1986, then you should have a pretty good idea of where this is going. It is a documentary about the making of Flight of the Navigator, kind of. In fact, what I would say is that Life After the Navigator is not a film about the making of Flight of the Navigator. And it's also not a profile on the actor Joey Kramer, who played the kid in the movie, and it's also not a gritty look at addiction and redemption and getting your life back. It's all three of those things wrapped into one, and then something even more. Like, there's so much going on here that I kind of thought almost as it was going on, like, is this going to really hold together by the time we get to the end? Because there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of shifting tones in terms of focusing on the film itself and the making of it, and speaking to producers, writers, the director, Randall Kleiser. And you're just getting all this perspective on the making of the film, to like the visual effects of the ship and casting Joey Kramer and all of this. And then you just get this other part where we're just focusing on Joey Kramer himself and where he is now as an adult, having gone through problems of addiction and also bank robbery and prison time, and now, putting his life back together again. And this is where the initial trailer really drew me in. It was kind of following him now, where he is kind of recovering, his life and kind of claiming his life back. And I thought, wow, that's like, you see the kid in the movie and you feel like, wow, he looks like such a sweet kid, and then you find out about like drug problems he had when he was a teenager, and it's like, wow, you'd never suspect it. And then you just think like, what why the fuck would I think that? Just because he kind of looks cute in the movie, and he seems like a good, and it's a weird thing to say, but I think sometimes you see people in movies or, on TV, and you just get a sense about certain people. And I would see him in this movie when I was a kid, and I just had this inherent sense that he was a really good person. And so it shocks you more than usual when you get that feeling about someone. But of course, you could never know this person. This is a fleeting 90 minutes of someone's life that has been accumulated over probably 6 months of filming a movie. This is not a representation of what they are as a person. But also, I don't think that, someone who's gone through the problems that Joey Kramer has is not a good person because of the bad things he may have done. And of course, there's a sliding scale of the bad things people do, of course. But you see the full story in this documentary, and you really get such context for how his life turned out, why it turned out the way that it did, and how much he wants to make things right, or did want to make things right, and is continuing to do so. And it's just, I was just blindsided by this film because I was interested in that story, because I love stories of redemption, especially when they're reality. That's something that's really, it can be really powerful. But I wasn't prepared for this film. I wasn't prepared for how powerful it was going to be, because he just seemed like such a lovely guy and a lovely kid. And then you hear about his relationship with his father, or the lack thereof, and what that must do to you, to hear some of the things that he heard from his father. I've had problems with my dad, which are just minuscule compared, like you probably couldn't even see them with a microscope compared to the problems he had with his father. And there are moments where I felt so hurt and kind of destroyed by these little tiny things, and so to imagine going through what he went through with his father, just as one example, I can't imagine it. I cannot imagine it. And so that it's just, it's really sad to see how things turned out for him, after he made that film and had kind of transitioned out of being an actor and stuff. And there's like, I really liked the personal touch of the film. Like, this wasn't, okay, we're gonna book an interview with Joey Kramer and sit him down and ask him about all of his struggles, and then we'll work the movie around that. No, they contact him when he's in prison, I think. That was the initial feeling out stage. And then once he came out and was in rehabilitation, back into living on his own or living with a group of people, I think there's these different stages of kind of getting back out of the prison, and they touch on that in the movie. But no, they're there visiting him and walking around the town and kind of hearing stories from him. And there's lots of different interviews they've done over different times. So it just feels like they really connected with this guy. It wasn't just a let's get in, get his story, and then build this kind of drama out of it. It's like, let's actually get to know him. Like, that's what it felt like to me. It felt like I had a personal touch. And you get to speak to people who he knew and his mother, and all these like family photos that really paint the picture really well. I think the editing is really good in the documentary. The pacing of it is very nice in terms of the chunks about the movie and then the chunks about Joey. And as we kind of move towards like the third, section of the third act of the film, so to speak, it really is all his story, and it all builds beautifully to this reunion that they did in America with with Joey and with the director Randall and like some of the other cast members. And so the film begins with like them waiting outside to kind of get this reunion going, and then it builds up to that towards the end, and it's such a lovely payoff. It's such a lovely payoff. And the ending was just really emotional for me. Like, it really, again, just caught me by surprise, because he had a bad life. Things went really bad for him, but he managed to turn it around, and that's a really hopeful thing. But I think the attitude in which he approaches it is something that is just again inspirational. I'm just reusing words at this point, but it's as a lover of the film, it added an extra layer of enjoyment to it for me. And it's strange, and it's fucking heartbreaking, because he's talking in the film and he's kind of getting emotional, breaking down, as he's saying that when he was arrested for this bank robbery, he felt so bad for the people who loved the film. Like this guy has been through so much and is going to jail over this, and he's worrying about how people who love the film are going to feel about it. And he felt terrible for the woman who worked at the bank that day. You feel that, I don't know. I think it's wrong of me to say, I think that he's a good person based on that film that I saw. But after having watched the documentary, I kind of feel like that maybe there is some truth to that. I don't know, because I just get nothing but a positive vibe from this guy. And I think that it's weird, because I don't think many people are going to watch this film as in terms of like a wide audience. It's great that it's on Amazon Prime. That's a really good thing. But if this was on like maybe Netflix and more eyes got into it, I just think that this is like a really good, uplifting story for people who might be struggling with things. To show you that this guy who is, I think he's in his 40s. It's like it's never really too late to turn things around. You can make positive changes in your life, and you can go through a lot of harsh things, but there's always a way out. Well, maybe some people there isn't. There's all kinds of. I hate saying blanket statements like that, because there's always someone who kind of pops up in the comments saying, "Well, what about people who haven't got a choice?" Like, I get it, but there's so many circumstances in which people might feel like they're trapped in their life, and there's so many ways to get out of that, and it really is you taking that step. And there's a bit towards the end that was just really, really touching, actually, when Joey is talking about, and throughout the film he does these kind of like to camera kind of self pieces, which were really nice. Like, they really rounded off the whole film for me, because it, again, even more of a personal touch. It's kind of like a video diary of him kind of talking about certain things, and they kind of build throughout the whole film. And at the very end, after the credits, he talks about how I'm worthy and I totally deserve this. And that was like, whoa, like that was a real hit you in the chest moment, because it's like, it's so difficult for people to admit that to themselves, I think, to really embrace the fact that, you do deserve good things, even if you've done bad things. And that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. I think a lot of people struggle with someone who's done something, bad like that, like a bank robbery or something, and they've broken the law. And people they'll just write people out of their lives because of it, and they won't look into why or try to understand why. And that's really the critical thing that's missing in society, I think, is just a level of understanding and empathy, which can just be so easily cast aside for a quick judgment, Anyway, I'm getting way off track. So the documentary, Life After the Navigator, I highly recommend it, if you're a fan of the film. And one thing I really liked, actually, and I don't know if this was like a carefully coordinated scheme or not, but there is a new Blu-ray release of the film itself from Second Sight Films, which is a fantastic release, by the way. And this has a whole bunch of special features on there. We have an interview with Randall Kleiser, with the producer. There's an interview with Joey Kramer on this, Veronica Cartwright, the special effects. There's all sorts of new goodies on this Blu-ray. And so I've watched all of this because I love the movie and I devoured all the extras. But what I found was the stories and the kind of behind-the-scenes tidbits and everything in Life After the Navigator, they didn't repeat. There was hardly any crossover between the two. I mean, this isn't a documentary, but it has like behind the scenes of the movie and lots of stories. So I was kind of expecting, they're interviewing the same people and people involved and stuff, and so we're probably going to get a lot of repeated stories, but there really wasn't. So I almost feel like the director, Lisa Downs, perhaps, this is going to be just like theorizing, it's just conjecture, recognized the fact that fans of the movie probably will have bought that Blu-ray and probably will have watched all those extras, and so maybe let's not touch on all the same behind-the-scenes tidbits and focus on different cool stories. So it just feels like with both of them in the collection, it's like a complete package of behind-the-scenes stories and remembrances, reflections from the film. But really, for me, the show stealer is that whole... I mean, the film is really about Joey Kramer, and it is Life After the Navigator. It's about him, But I do like that they peppered in the context of the actual making of the film itself and everything, and that just, it was just nicely sectioned off, and it had such an impact. It really did. It's one of my favorite behind-the-scenes, film documentaries now. I think it's one I'll watch again and again because it's just uplifting. It's inspirational. I'm just reusing the same bullshit phrases, but they're not bullshit. There's so much truth behind, calling a film like this inspirational, and it's just nice. In a world where we're watching, kind of downbeat documentaries about serial killers and all this stuff on Netflix, it's just nice to have one about someone whose life, tragically didn't really go very well for a very long time, but, so hopefully has sprung back. And there's just a lot of hope in that, and it's really, really nice. And if you love the movie, it's a nice... I mean, I don't know, maybe some people would find it a bit too hard to watch because they love the movie so much. I don't know. But for me, as I said, it kind of adds enjoyment to it for me because, I don't know, I feel like I got to know, the process behind the making of the movie. And I it's different for people because I know that some people don't like to know too much about the behind the scenes of stuff. There's a family member once who I was watching Lord of the Rings with, and I was saying, hey, that, Gandalf and Frodo, they're actually sitting like so far apart from each other, but the camera's angled so there's a force. He's like, no, don't. He's like, don't tell me. He's like, I don't want to know. It's real, okay? It's real. Like, just stop. I'm like, okay. So some people don't like to know about this stuff, but for me, learning behind the scenes context just adds more enjoyment to the film for me, unless it's like a really terrible production and everyone hated working on it and there was abuse on the set. But, I like learning the little details, but knowing the guy behind that character who I loved so much as a kid, it's, I don't know, it rounds off the experience. I don't know, it's just a nice thing to learn more about it, and I would highly recommend picking up the Blu-ray because there's a bunch of extras on here, which is really cool. I haven't delved into them yet, and there's also a nice booklet. Like, I love the design of everything. It's really nicely, like, it's kind of, like an old VHS cover, It's very much appealing to the kind of people who'd be interested in this sort of thing. And I was very surprised to see that there's a nice booklet as well. So it's very nicely put together. I think there's a note from the director in here, and then also a piece written by Joey Kramer. So it's just a nice package. It came with a nice personal note, so it just feels like a handmade product, And again, unlike some of the documentaries that you see online that get crowdfunded and they don't necessarily pan out, this one panned out so well. It feels like a proper professional product, and it is on Amazon Prime. So if you don't want to get the Blu-ray, but I would recommend getting the disc. You get the extras and stuff, which isn't on Amazon Prime. But just see it. Just give it a watch. I mean, I don't know if anyone who hasn't seen the film would maybe enjoy it as much. But I think that it's just a basic human story, If you're interested in this guy who was a child actor and things were going so well and he had so much talent, and then it all just slipped away, and now he's put his life back together. Like, it's just a great story. I think we're drawn to stories about people redeeming themselves. The redemption arc is a big thing, but when it's like in real life, it just has it has a higher potency to it. I don't know. It's really nice to watch. Anyway, I'm blathering on. So I would recommend the film and recommend the Blu-ray as well. Very reasonably priced, I think, for the kind of project that it is too. and you can get it from their website, Life After Films. They've done a previous one actually called Life After Flash, or The Flash. Wouldn't be The Flash, would it? Flash Gordon is it's based on. I have no knowledge of Flash Gordon. I've never seen the movie, so I think it's based on the guy who played Flash Gordon, and again the movie itself. So you can go check that out if you're a fan of Flash Gordon. I don't know if that was on Amazon Prime, but there's a Blu-ray of it on the website, lifeafterfilms.com perhaps. And they're working on a new one called Life After Atreyu, which you can imagine where that's going with a name like Atreyu. So it's going to be like a never-ending story piece, but focusing on the guy, Noah Hathaway, I think, from memory, who played Atreyu. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a day one purchase for me, I think. Obviously, with the pandemic, things have slowed down, but apparently, yeah. So the director Lisa Downs wants to do like a series of these documentaries, which is very cool. So I'll be watching her career with great interest, as Emperor Palpatine once said, because these films are just really, and if you can find that kind of personal angle into it as well with the subject, I think that it just it reveals so much more, and it just becomes more about the people behind the film than maybe the film itself, which, there's, again, sliding scales to that, whether you want to focus more on the film and the technical aspects, but I think that the human stories there in the film business and the film industry can be really fascinating, and this is a fascinating story, a sad one, but ultimately again, hopeful one. So thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans and calling into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really